New York's chief judge and appointee of Governor Kathy Hochul is facing an ethics complaint from state Republican lawmakers who argue he overstepped earlier this year during public comments related to legislation that would make it easier to reconsider criminal sentences that have been previously handed down. For more on the red flag thrown against Chief Judge Rowan Wilson, we're joined in the Capitol Press Room studio by State Senator Anthony Palumbo, the ranking Republican on his chamber's Judiciary Committee. Thanks for making the time, Senator.
Well, thanks for having me. Good to see you.
So, for background, during remarks in late February at a CUNY Law School event, the chief judge told the crowd, in reference to another judge calling a defendant an animal, that, quote, "When those judges come up to be elected, don't vote for them and get other people not to vote for them. That's something you can do for me." He also described the current sentencing laws as, quote unquote, stupid. So what is it about those comments that crosses a line for a judge, and specifically here, the head of New York's top court?
Sure, and I think the most significant aspect of it is suggesting who to vote for.
Okay.
So really the last part of that. The judge, when you're on the administrative level, you can, to an extent, make some comments on legislation that might actually help the courts. I believe that the Second Look Act is too substantive for the judge to be commenting on, even though he did so. But I think it really crosses the line when he starts negatively endorsing certain types of judges. And I think the best way to look at this is think of it in the inverse. Think if you had a judge, say on Long Island or upstate, who said, an administrative judge now, even just if a trial judge said this, it's bad. When you have the guy who's in charge of an entire judicial branch saying it, I think it's even worse. And ultimately just saying, you know what, folks, what you need to do at a symposium, you need to only vote for those judges that give out maximum sentences on sex offense cases. Fill in the blank. Maximum offenses on DWI cases and maximum sentences. They need to make sure that those people go to jail and they rot in jail. Similar to the comments that were offensive to Judge Wilson.
Sure, it's kind of the inverse of it.
Exactly. And that, I think, gives us more perspective that it doesn't even matter what the ideology is. Judges are not supposed to comment at all. And I had several examples of judges who were admonished, sanctioned, some publicly censured, and some even removed for endorsing a candidate. One judge simply said that this lawyer practices in front of me. He's always prepared. He'll make a great judge. That's an endorsement. That's wrong. And he was admonished for it. He was actually censured publicly. And there are different levels of sanction that can be imposed by the Commission on Judicial Conduct. And so that's really the concern. And I think because it's the chief judge, I don't think there are many people who would actually have the fortitude to go after the chief judge. I mean, I'm a lawyer, and I said this on several occasions, like this isn't something you think about as a 1L sitting in law school in the library saying, I can't wait when I'm really going to have the pinnacle of my career will be to file a grievance against any judge, let alone the chief judge of the Court of Appeals. So those are the real concerns that I think needed to be exposed, and at least it warrants an investigation. This is not something that we would do hysterically or do without some precedent, where it seems as if this were a trial judge, if this were some village judge someplace who said similar comments, I think without question they'd be sanctioned. But that's not even for us to decide. Let's let the commission do its thing. Well,
do you have a recommendation, though? Is there an outcome that you think does make sense for these types of comments?
Well, this got a lot more coverage than we expected. Overall, the fact that we filed the complaint, and I won't name names, but I've had many, many members of the bench weigh in on it from both political parties who thought it was inappropriate. And so I think we're all in that same boat where at the very least the chief judge needs to, I think what he should do is apologize and say, look, that was meant metaphorically or whatever, and that this wasn't intended to be a specific endorsement of a certain type of judge or judges that possess certain ideology. Because when it comes from the chief judge, that permeates all the way down when he says, do me a favor. That's a favor you can do for myself and Judge Zayas, was the end of that comment, is not vote for these judges and get your friends to not vote for these types of judges. So I think that sends a clear message as well. If I'm a trial judge and I have someone who absolutely deserves a very, very heavy-handed sentence, I think, for example, being from Suffolk County, Rex Hoyerman, if he's convicted, who slaughtered multiple young girls and threw them in the woods to just rot, that's someone who should not ever be released. That's someone who's sick. And I get it. It should be consistent with the crime, whatever the punishment is. But a judge may not actually sentence in accordance with the facts and circumstances of a particular case because they're afraid that if it gets to the Court of Appeals, Judge Wilson is going to reduce the sentence and he's going to reverse me. Or that Judge Wilson won't be pleased with me and the way that I treated this case, and I won't get assignment to a better part, or I won't be advanced to the appellate division. All of these things come into play when you have the chief judge making a comment such as this, in my humble opinion.
What do you think of the argument from the court's spokesperson, so the chief judge spokesperson, who basically said the judge was speaking about proper judicial conduct and essentially encouraging New Yorkers to stay informed about the conduct of judges already on the bench and to take that into consideration when they're voting? I mean, that's more ambiguous than what the chief judge actually said, but what do you think of that broader argument? Is that something that the chief judge could get away with saying if, in fact, that is what he was trying to say with those more specific comments that he actually made?
And that's really, I think to an extent, yes, but he hasn't done that.
Sure.
And I think they have a good comms team to try and neutralize what was a very, very one-sided statement.
Well, we can talk later about their comms team, but yeah.
I don't mean that in a bad way, but, I shouldn't comment that way. But,
I just meant I might have my own complaints.
Yeah, right. But specifically, the comments I saw the first few days only addressed his position on the Second Look Act. They completely avoided commenting on his suggestion to vote a certain way, because that's just it's just unequivocally inappropriate. And more importantly, I guess the final thought coming from me is that even if it's not deemed to be sanctionable, I think the appearance of impropriety it needs to be overcome. And just like with the congressional redistricting, we had someone who was a Democrat operative in the Capitol, Judge Perlman, who presided over that case. And he was reversed eventually on appeal. But that, just like my comment on it could come from either side of the political spectrum, that doesn't matter. Even if it was a perfect decision and was affirmed and was great, the fact that he was someone who was involved with the politics of it, he should have recused himself and let another judge make that decision. And that's really the difference between, First Amendment right to express what you want to express in the world, in America, and particularly New York, and being a judge. You need to, most judges I know, I don't even know what political party, the older ones that I haven't seen on the ballot, I don't even know what political party they hail from, because they're completely neutral and it makes no difference. They're constrained by the law.
That's a bold statement. But next steps, the Commission on Judicial Conduct has a multi-step process to go through as they decide sort of this first initial review and then whether they want to sink their teeth into it. They have skin in the game in the sense that this is a Democratic-run town. This is a Democratic-appointed judge. Their budget and powers are basically tied to what the Democratic majorities in the legislature and the governor want to support. So what do you think this could mean for their legitimacy as an agency moving forward? I mean, is this solely an outcome-based thing for you in terms of assessing what they do here? Or if they go through a process that smells okay to you, maybe the outcome isn't what you like, and you still have faith in the commission? I mean, how do you think about the next steps and what they need to look like?
And that's a very interesting question. And it's not that I actually like or prefer a certain outcome. I just feel as if, as I mentioned before, when the chief judge behaves like this, I don't think anyone will have the fortitude to go after him or her, whoever that may be. So we needed to, as elected officials, and there was a group of us that all agreed that this was something that needed to be done. I'm concerned that, yes, there is an overarching political aspect to it because they're all appointees except for two. The minority conferences in each house have appointed two individuals to the Commission on Judicial Conduct. And you know what they have always done, and Bob Tembekian, they're wonderfully nonpartisan. They're very, very consistent. Actually, before we did this, I looked at a bunch of prior decisions that were made public. As I said, we wouldn't just do this trying to gain political hay. This is something I know.
The one honest politician in Albany.
You clutch. We might do other things to do that, but this is something that's really serious. And yes, and I'm sorry that I made you gasp.
Okay.
I know you're very faint of heart when it comes to these things. Yeah. But this is a big deal. This is really a big deal. You don't accuse the chief judge of doing of impropriety. Without having at least something to hang your hat on. And we felt, based upon many, many other decisions consistent with how the Commission on Judicial Conduct has acted before. So wherever it ends up. My concern is that I would like to at least see some sort of a public, even just an admonishment, say, Judge, you can't do this anymore. and him say, okay, great, I understand. And whether he does it again or not is up to him. But I think the entire judiciary, 3,000 some odd judges in the state of New York, need to know that this is not appropriate. Because if the chief judge can do it, what do you think some town judge in central New York can do? They can start endorsing candidates. They can go bananas in either direction. And again, the ideology of it doesn't matter. I think it's just important that we have some decision to give some guidance as to the behavior of judges, because I think it was inappropriate.
Do you think this incident creates an opportunity to revisit anything with regards to the commission's powers or our expectations for judges? I mean, there's this idea that they're non-political actors, but in reality, there's some, I would say, some hypocrisy there. But what do you think? Is this an opportunity for broader examination, or do you think this is limited to just this one incident and that's what needs to be the focus?
Well, this is so unique. I don't know if anyone has ever done this before. I know Janet DiFiore, the past chief judge, she resigned under somewhat of a political cloud. And
she was being investigated by the commission.
Right,
yes.
Right, but it never really got to that point. So I think the commission's powers and duties are pretty clear, and in my personal opinion, I think they really do a good job, because it's regardless of political position. From what I've seen, it's they call balls and strikes, and that's and they call them fairly. So I'm hoping that'll happen here. And look, if I'm proven wrong, I'm proven wrong. I have no particular interest in the outcome other than I think that was, even if it's appropriate or not, even if it's sanctionable or not, I should say, I think it's inappropriate, because there's an appearance of partisan positions that he was taking. And that's really the point. Just that appearance is enough to change your behavior.
Well, we've been speaking with State Senator Anthony Palumbo. He's a Long Island Republican. Senator, thanks so much for making the time.
Thanks for having me. Good to see you.
Support for the Capitol Press Room is provided in part by the Lawsuit Reform Alliance of New York. Fraud and lawsuit abuse impact car insurance costs for New Yorkers. Reforms are being proposed to mitigate their impact. Information on these reforms is available at keepnewyorkaffordable.org.
Support for the Capitol Press Room comes from O'Donnell & Associates, a public affairs firm providing strategic guidance to businesses and nonprofits on navigating policy and regulatory issues. More information is available at o'donnellsolutions.com.